Okay, I thought I would provide maybe a little bit of audio and video feedback to, again, help you sort of focus your essay and give you tips in terms of just making it a better essay. So first of all, just some formatting things. You want to make sure that your name, page number, date is on the left-hand side, and you want to include page numbers on the top right-hand side. Now, you start out with this paragraph, and this would obviously be the introductory paragraph. And so what you want to do in an introductory paragraph is maybe you want to start out with maybe a hook, something that's interesting about Phyllis Wheatley, but pretty early on, what you want to do is kind of focus on the thesis. And generally speaking, the thesis is at the end of the first paragraph. What you don't want to do within your first paragraph is include quotes. Analysis and sort of engagement with the text usually goes in the latter paragraphs, and those quotes and engagement with the text are used to go back to overall thesis and affirm your overall thesis. So what is your thesis? I think probably your thesis is right here, and it goes to right here. I think you'll notice that I actually took out this line one example because anytime you're using examples, that's something that would fall into the evidence category of your essay. And any evidence is in the latter part of the essay. It's never in the first paragraph. So you've got this thesis maybe. Compared to other African Americans, Wheatley doesn't go into detail on the terrible things that are happening to African Americans on the ship from Africa. Instead, she was talking about treatment. She always finds a way to refer anything she's talking about to her face. So just reading that out loud was a little bit of a challenge. I think you have a few typos, and you want to kind of read everything that you write out loud just to see how smooth it flows. This is an okay thesis. I would ask yourself, why does she not necessarily talk about slavery? And maybe something that you could suggest is the role that she has as a slave herself doesn't allow for a lot of flexibility and leeway to really articulate the suffering that people go through because of slavery. So that's just something to keep in mind. But if this is your thesis, what you're going to focus on is the absence of her sort of constant reference to slavery, and instead her focus on Christianity. And why does she focus on Christianity? It probably legitimizes her a little bit more as a writer. She's speaking to an audience that is almost entirely Christian, and she is gently pushing against racism, maybe not slavery head on, but maybe your argument could also be like, compared to African Americans, Wheatley doesn't go into detail about the terrible things regarding slavery. However, she often refers to Christianity as a way to be more accessible to her audience and gently pull in some anti-racist ideas, like, for example, Black people are just as equal and just as valuable as white Christians. You see that in her poem, To America from Africa. So you've got one example. When the Father of Mercy, 'twas thy gracious hand brought me to safety from those shores, dark abodes, from those dark abodes. So the first thing is, in this line, you want to make sure that you're alluding to where you specifically got this poem or this line from. It's obviously not from Africa to America. So you would say one example of Wheatley maybe ignoring slavery, but referring to Christianity comes from the poem Da 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 Da, where Wheatley says, Father Mercy, 'twas a gracious hand brought me to safety from these dark abodes. Now, you really want to have a period right here, and what you want to do is right after here, add a line something like, in this line, Wheatley suggests that Christianity essentially saved people of color or Africans from damnation, and they were essentially saved, even though she's also indirectly referring to slavery. So she's basically legitimizing, to a certain degree, what happened to them because they were saved. And you want to just, within this line, which is a really interesting line, just kind of analyze it a little bit. You don't want to just drop something there and not explain what it means to your overall thesis. Every time you have a quote, you want to follow that quote with the bottom part of the quote sandwich, which is your engagement with the quote, which is your explanation of how it goes back to the overall thesis. Now, you go on and you start out with the phrase "I think," and I want to encourage you to avoid phrases like "I think," "I feel," "I believe," because what you're doing here as a writer is you are using the evidence to support your thesis, and the evidence comes from the text, right? And so it's not really what you think, it's what the evidence shows. So Wheatley is having a hard time facing the harshness of slavery and only want to discuss bits and pieces of the things that happen. It's small, but you can see there are a couple of small typos throughout this line. Wheatley have a hard time facing the harshness of slavery, only want to discuss bits and pieces of the things that happen. So again, I want to encourage you, once you've finished your draft, to read it out loud, to share it with a friend, to reread it out loud, because these small typos will not come up in spell check, obviously. Now, this paragraph seems to sort of meander a little bit, right? You're not focusing on the text, really. You're just kind of talking about what you think Phyllis Wheatley, feels and believes. But again, what you want to do is rely on the text as much as possible. So you go to the text right here. You're going to take out "I feel" and just say Wheatley skips over, something like that. The fact that slaves went through a lot, right? And what you want to do is explain, maybe incorporate a couple of lines right here from the letter to Samson Occam. Use those lines explicitly to affirm that she is not talking about slavery. And again, go back to your thesis. Why is she not talking about slavery? Why is she constantly talking about Christianity? She's talking about Christianity to make herself more accessible to the audience, to affirm, while gently pushing against the idea of slavery, or gently pushing against the idea of racism, at the same time legitimizing her argument. Okay, so basically throughout this text, you just want to do that over and over again. You want to make sure that you're clearly indicating which lines you're citing, while saying, she also says, "God grant deliverance in his name." So are you citing Samuel Occam here? Remind the reader explicitly which lines you're citing. Of course, what you also want to do is incorporate at least 2 secondary sources. Just needs to be a line or two. And you want to use those secondary sources to be integrated with your overall ideas. And if they don't adapt exactly to what your overall idea is, try to just incorporate, something that relates to your overall idea. But what you want to do with your secondary sources is just use them as added evidence for your overall thesis. Okay. Then the final thing, of course, is a conclusion paragraph. And the best thing to do with a conclusion paragraph is just to rehash everything that you've talked about within the scope of your essay. And so you want to say, in conclusion, that's really the simplest way to do it. And then you want to basically summarize everything that you've argued through every paragraph, and you want to finish your essay like that. So it's really important to, again, have a good introductory paragraph where you clearly state your thesis. Use the main bodies of the essay to constantly use the actual text to affirm your thesis. And when you use the actual text, follow that text with really specific clarification of why that text affirms your thesis. And then finish with a conclusion paragraph that typically starts with the simple phrase, "in conclusion." Okay, citations, nope. You call it a works cited. And these look good, but this right here is actually an APA format. This is an APA format. So just small things throughout, but you are on the right track. I do see that you are focusing primarily on Wheatley. It just needs to be more organized. And again, you need to just kind of focus on textual analysis and not stray from that.